Okay, so now it's after the war, and had you had being flying airplanes given you the idea that you wanted to make aviation your career, or what were you thinking after war that you might go do?
I never had a single thought to my memory of doing anything else.
Uh-huh.
I decided that long before the war. The war just was a pleasant interval of nice training that the government supplied for me. It didn't interfere with my plan at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, right after the war, started settling down, just being home for a while and seeing other friends come back from the war and all that. It was kind of a busy period where everything was going around there. Even the town people, you might say the civilians at the time, were all in sort of a state of flux. The war being over, and they had to all settle down, find new jobs, and move back home wherever they were from, if they were there from some way off, you know. So it was kind of a state of flux, but as soon as I was unbusy enough to look for something to do, why I had no thought of looking at anything except aviation. And I really didn't look for anything to do for the first at least 6 months or so. I don't remember exactly, but just had fun flying little airplanes, got checked out in Cubs and stuff, and around the little dirt fields around home, and flew around there. My best buddy Frank came home from the Army, and we flew together a whole lot. And then we went together down to South Georgia and got a couple of Cubs that belonged to somebody down there, and did what we call barnstorming. We just flew them out away from the airport and landed in pastures and tried to find people to care for a ride. That was the closest thing to a job we came up with. Then after that period, that went on for about 3 or 4 months of the summer, late summer that year, I guess, which would have been 46. And let's see, August 46. And then I guess I went around and talked to people, and going around doing something, staying busy. Somehow ran onto a job flying an airplane for a gospel singing group in Atlanta who wanted to travel around in an airplane, wanted to buy an airplane, travel in. The airplane dealer supplied them with the airplane and the pilot for a little while, try it out, see if they liked it. He was hoping they'd buy the airplane. And so I was the pilot that's supplied by the dealer with the airplane. I flew that bunch around for a few months and didn't like that. After a while, I probably told you that story, that one night up in Nashville, we were late to the singing, I guess they call it. They go to a hall somewhere and sing, and got back to the airport about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was real bad weather, and it was raining, and I remember the administration building was a brick building and a paved area here, and the rain was hitting that and bouncing up on this brick wall and freezing right there. Little raindrops freeze right there, and I didn't even check on the weather. In the weather office, I just saw that and decided we weren't going anywhere, and so they finally showed up. I said, well, you might as well go to the motel and stay till tomorrow. We'll see what the weather is. And they said, oh, we got to go. We got to go. And I said, well, goodbye. And very short order. That's not exactly what I said, I guess, but it was very abrupt. They were determined to go, and I was equally determined not to go. And so they fired me on the spot. And they couldn't fire me because I was working for the guy in the airplane, but they fired me and said, you can't, we won't wait for you anymore. So I said, fine. I went back to the motel, and they stood around the airport, I guess, for a little while, and they had a friend. They had a twin Cessna, a bamboo bomber.
Oh.
And do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. There was one at the museum.
Uh-huh. And I guess they didn't have a full airplane, and they were friends with my people. They said, you can come go with us. We'll take you. And they couldn't they were going to do it, and then they were trying to decide who was going. They had too many. The two groups had too many. So my group decided, well, if we can't all go, we won't any go. So they didn't go, and that airplane took off and crashed about 5 minutes after takeoff and killed everybody. And they knew about it there at the airport right then. And about, I don't know, it was late in the morning, wasn't daylight yet, but they was knocking on my door at the motel. I opened the door and there they were, and I can't remember the details of the words, but they said something about, how about you come back to work lunch? We won't go with you anymore. And I said, no, I don't want to. That's what happened. They told me about that plane crashing. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I don't like your decisions. I'm not going to work for you anymore. So that was the last I saw them. And that was the first job, you might say, I had after the war. Then after that and a few more intervals that I can't remember details of, I finally got a job. I got my instructor's license and got a job at Park Airfield, which was a small grass strip and had just opened up to employ the GI Bill for training. That's what everybody in aviation was doing then, big thing. And so I went to work there and trained under that, and that lasted about a year and a half. And then all the veterans that wanted to learn to fly faded away, and that was the end of it, I guess. And so that didn't last very long, but that was a year and a half of steady work for me. That was the first real job I had. And it was very enjoyable. And of course, that was the first instruction I had done, which seemed to be, as you know now, kind of catch on. That's what I kind of got into. The more I did, the more I liked, I guess, and have stayed with instruction through all the other jobs I've had. In other words, I can look at myself and say, well, I'm a pilot, but I'm an instructor more than that. The situation that I found myself in usually ends up in instruction rather than just flying. So I've evidently enjoyed that more than anything else. So went from, well, the Park Air thing, GI Bill faded away, and the owner of Park Air faded out and left me with the airport. And I stayed at the airport and ran the airport for a couple of years there. That was the deadest period in aviation there was, and there wasn't any money at all. Gene and I were lucky to hang on through that. We had a little country boy that came to work there for us for gassing the airplanes. He just lived down the road a little ways, and this is out in the country where Park Air was. And every day he'd come back to work, he'd come with a big brown bag of groceries that was about that high and about that big around. He'd have full of vegetables and things that they grew, his family grew, and he'd come up the door and say, got some vegetables for you today. And Gene would say, how much? And he said, a quarter. And she'd give him a quarter, and we'd eat on that for a week.
How did you meet Gene?
I'm sorry?
How did you meet Gene?
Well, during that first period, right at the end of 45, when I got home and was just fooling around town with friends coming home and everything, looking for something to do, and one of the things I did, a friend of mine named Bill Lee took me to a girls basketball game at the local gym, and Gene was playing with a local team on that, and I saw that action and was talking to my friend Bill, said, boy, I sure like the looks of that girl, or something, I don't know what I said, but he said, well, I know her, and I don't really know her too well, but I know somebody knows her real well. And so he called his friend, I can't remember her name, and she called Gene and made us a date. And so I got this date with her and took her out. Never quit after that.
Did you get married right away?
No, that was early, and that was probably in January or early, certainly February, early in the year of 46. And we got married in September of 46. So I started playing with a local men's team basketball to keep up with the basketball thing, and so we started going to each other's games and just got along pretty good. Kind of grew from there, you might say.
You also, it's a little bit off topic, but you played tennis for a while too, didn't you?
Yeah, but not in those days.
Yeah.
I didn't start playing tennis at all till I was 50, 55.
Oh,
When I actually moved to California.
I see.
Gene wanted something to do while I had to go to the Burbank airport, and we lived way down south where's the Spruce Goose? What's the town down there?
Oh, Long Beach?
Long Beach. We bought a house down in Long Beach and had to go to Burbank for me and stay there all day. come back in the evening and home is all I had. So on the weekends, yeah, well, all the time, and Jean wanted something to do, so she decided she'd join up with a local group playing tennis, learning tennis, had an instructor. He was teaching them tennis. She had never played at all. And so I kind of took up with her, and we started playing tennis together there. That's where the tennis thing picked up. I stayed with it for quite a few years, but when we left California, she didn't do it anymore.
So how did it come to be that you started the flying school at that? Was that the next big thing that happened, is you started that flying school? After you, that's the same airport,
I was still
isn't
at
it?
Park Air.
Yeah.
I had the airport there for a couple of years. That was a flying school right there. That
Okay.
was, I guess that's the first school I had, you might say, because I was the only one there. And it was, somebody once a week was about all there was. There wasn't a whole lot there. But then after that, there were a couple of odd things went on in time, and I ended up going to Delta. No, first I went to Lockheed as an engineer. They were hiring engineers. Well, I took a test, and they came back and the test said, "You're an engineer," and I said, "Okay." Well, where's my desk? So they gave me a desk, and I worked about 2 months there for Lockheed at that. Didn't like some of the things I saw there at all, and so I quit that. And about that time, Delta, I don't know how I found out about it, but Delta started hiring because they were merging with CNS Airlines. And so they were hiring some people because they didn't say so. They didn't say so, and nobody said at the time, but they were hiring people because the instant the merger was through with CNS, they were going to fire all the CNS people and replace them with Delta people. And that's what they did. I thought it was a very good lesson on how to watch business people.
Now, did you have an aeronautical engineering degree at this time?
No,
Okay.
no.
Did you go back to school later and get that?
I went to Tech. No, I didn't go to ever get a degree.
Oh, I
But
thought you did.
I went to Tech. I went to Young Harris College before I went into the Navy, and after I got out that fall and that early spring of 45, 46, I went to Tech for probably maybe a year's credit. I don't know, not much. And that was the last I had of that.
So did Continental hire you on then?
Delta.
Delta, I mean.
Delta hired me and went through their school for Delta's process is when they hire somebody in the airplane business, in the flying game, as a pilot, you first have to go to be a flight engineer. You can't be a pilot first off. And so he went through flight engineer school and checked out as an engineer. And the minute my class, there were 13 in my class, I believe, the minute we graduated from the school, we got orders to go straight to Memphis because that's where CNS home base was. And we got over there, and they started sending us through the Constellation Engineer School. And by the time we graduated from that, at that moment, they just fired all the CNS people. Didn't fire them; they couldn't. The contract called for if this merger goes through, we have to supply. Delta has to guarantee a job to all the CNS people for some length of time. I don't know what it was, but that was part of the contract. But Delta, just as soon as they got that merger complete, they just told those people, "Well, you're not going to be able to fly engineer or pilot with us. So we'll give you a job, though. We got a contract called security job." So they offered everybody a job of some kind. Handling baggage didn't matter. They had to pay them the same they were supposed to pay, but they could have any kind of job, which I thought was about as dirty a deal as I ever heard. And so they got rid of most of the CNS people. Some of them took those jobs and stayed with it. Most of them, though, they offered, I think, a cash payment, a year's pay or something like that. And if you'll quit, that way you're gone, but we don't have to fire you. So I was in Memphis then. CNS people were gone, so I started flying the CNS routes on the Constellation out of Memphis.
And you were the pilot?
No, as flight engineer.
Okay, it's flight engineer. That's fine.
I thought that was a little bit, I had a little bit of a moment of thought about all that, but didn't bother. It was a job at the time, that was fine. But as it grew, I thought, the first thought is, well, I don't like being a flight engineer, I want to be a pilot. But then after a little bit of that, I said, this ain't bad at all. I'm sitting back in the back here doing an easy job, and the poor sucker up in the left seat has got to decide whether to go in the weather or not, and how much fuel he's got and all that. I don't have to decide anything. I just stay back here and keep the engines running.
Now,
So
what kind of plane was it? The Continentals?
Constellation.
Constellations, I mean.
Yeah. So it's really certainly a comfortable, easy job, and I liked it all right.
Was this before the Super Connie, or this?
Well, it was the kind we were flying. A lot of different kinds. Super Connie was one of the last ones.
Okay.
But the one we had is the 049, which is one of the first. There was one before that. I've forgotten what the number was, but there was one kind of before that. The TWA had some of those. They were really original primitives, and we had the next one up. I forgot what the 049 was. The TWA. I forgot what ours was. Just a 49 or something like that. But anyhow, we were flying the CNS routes. CNS has been flying kind of since they came out and had good routes and had a good airline going there. But I guess business of some kind made them merge with Delta.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the routes we flew was a trip to St. Louis, I believe, from our base at Memphis, where we got off our airplane and got on TWA's airplane, which is the 049, and flew it out west of Kansas somewhere, I've forgotten now, and turn around and come back to Memphis on our regular airplane. And when we were flying that 049, we'd always have to get out the airplane handbook and look at everybody in the crew would have to look up something and say, well, this is not like ours, and look up and see what it was. I didn't think that was a very good operation either, but it was all right. It was handbooks and airline procedures were enough to cover whatever lack of knowledge there was. But
now I'm a little confused on when you had the flight school with the champs. Was that later or
well,
before?
Park Air was the champs.
Okay.
There was one of them, but then after that, I went with Delta, and all of them I was telling you about there.
Okay.
And then in '53, Delta, I don't know, it was a CNS merger or what, downsized some and furloughed a whole bunch of people, and our class was included in that. So all the people at CNS in Memphis there and myself and everybody in that bunch that went up there with them got furloughed. So I was out of Delta and went back to Atlanta looking for a job and found a job at Fulton County Airport, new airport in Atlanta at that time, and had been an operator there, but he had flunked out for some reason and he left, and the county was looking for somebody to take over the lease of that part of that airport, which was a pretty good airport. It certainly wasn't like Park Air. They had big runways. It had two big paved runways and administration building and everything. It's a big airport today. It's grown considerably. At that time, Hartsfield Airport was the Atlanta airport, and it was like Chicago International. It was the airport, but Fulton County Airport was on the other side of Atlanta, and it was designed, built there by the county to be a reliever airport for the big airport. They could see it was overgrowing itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to start operating there, the school I had there, and had champs again. Had several different, had champs, and had a Cub, I remember, and a 170 and a 195. I had several airplanes there. At that time, for that school, I bought the first Cessna 180. It was delivered in Atlanta. That dealer that I'd worked for earlier was the Cessna dealer, and he got this airplane in and hadn't sold it, so I made a deal with him to take that airplane and took it over to Fulton and operated there a little bit. Later traded it for a 195. So that was the two places, Park Air and Fulton County, were both champ schools, basically.
Okay.
That's a source for all the things that I might have told you about the champ.
I think that's why I was a little confused. You actually had them at two different times.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Two different places, two different times.
Let me
The
hit
things
stop.
in those days, for me, things in those days were changing pretty rapidly. It's hard to even keep them in line.